What's going on, everyone? Alliance Orc here. Welcome back to another video. In this video, we'll be doing part 2 of random WoW raid facts you may or may not have known about. Everything will be featured in raids, and they're just kind of little Easter eggs on things you may or may not have known about the raids when you run them for your weekly clears or whatnot. But with that being said, sit back, relax, grab you some pizza Pringles like me. I love these things. And subscribe if you're brand new. With that being said, let's hop into the video. All right, and our first fact comes from Rage Winterchill, the first boss in the Battle for Mount Hyjal. Now, the reason why I bring this boss up is because it's kind of a two raid for oneer, because in Hellfire Citadel, you actually will encounter Anetheron, Asgalor, and Khazro Gal before fighting Archimonde as 3 mini bosses all at the same time. However, Rage Winterchill is nowhere to be seen, which leads to the assumption that during the Battle for Mount Hyjal, they must have gotten Rage Winterchill's phylactery. Otherwise, why else would he not be there? All right, and our next fact actually takes us to the Vault of Archivon, and it's with all 4 bosses, as every boss in here is a reference to the Planeteers from a very old cartoon known as Captain Planet, with Coralon the Flame Watcher being based off of Wheeler, Emelon the Storm Watcher being based off of Linka, Toravon the Ice Watcher being based off of G, and Archivon the Stone Watcher being based off of Kwame. And then, of course, in Pandaria, in Townlog Steps, you have the rare Hugalon in this cave right here, who is based off of Ma T. Right, in Naxxramas, if you kill Kel'Thuzad's cat, Mr. Bigglesworth, you will get this dialogue. Hello?
Now! A curse upon you, indoors! The armies of the Lich King will hunt you down. You will not escape your fate.
So, as many of you probably already know, you cannot defeat Algalon the Observer during Wrath of the Lich King time walking, and the reason for that is probably because Blizzard wants to maintain the prestige of the Herald of the Titans title that you get when you defeat him with a full party of people with gear. I think it's either no better than Ice Crown or no better than Ulduar. So Blizzard does keep prestige in some way. This next fact is one of my all-time favorites because it blew my mind and is part of the reason why I made this video. But in the Mimiron encounter in Ulduar, if you do not know this, you'll never look at this the same way, but this device is actually a can opener. And the item that the machine that comes out from phase 2 is literally in a can that gets opened. Just watch. Picture a can opener. You can't tell me that's not a can opener. That is so freaking cool. See, can't change my mind. And for our next raid fact, we have the champions of the Horde and Alliance fight in Trial of the Crusaders. This fight is the closest PvP and PvE has come to coexisting as one. As during this fight, all of the NPC raid bosses all exhibit different types of abilities that the player has access to, such as crowd control, blinds, silence, and even bloodlust. This fight was very much despised by the community because of how much CC this fight truly put into the game. Despite only having one boss in the Ruby Sanctum, this raid has all of the properties, being able for Balthorus the Warborn, General Zatharian, and Savina Ragefire all have the capabilities of being raid bosses. but none of them are. They do not show up in a dungeon journal. They do not drop anything exquisite. These three are literally the most wannabe raid bosses in WoW's existence. And our next fact comes from Sinestra. Someone can fact check me on this if I'm wrong, but I'm quite sure Sinestra is the first time Blizzard has ever introduced a hidden boss to a raid. What I mean by this is if you switch the raid to normal mode, Sinestra completely disappears out of the dungeon journal. A feature we will not see the last of, actually. But I do believe Sinestra is the first boss to make this grand debut. And she was Deathwing's prime consort, which, if you don't know what that means, it basically means that she was Deathwing's little boo thing. Poor thing. You can even see the claw marks from him violating her. Those that do not know, at the start of the Mount Hyjal quest line, you actually give Fandral Staghelm over to a green dragon named Alistra. That is who this boss is. The reason why Fandral says she's been reborn is because word gets out that she let Fandral go, and thus it led to her execution. Alright, and our next raid boss is Shanox. Shanox is one of the only raid bosses who uses the entire raid as his encounter room. Meaning that if you were progging this boss and someone AFK'd and pulled him, there was no resetting Shanox, as he basically patrols the entire raid. This next fact is really warrior coded, which I love. If you have the weapon Stromkar the Warbreaker, or if you are, I think even if you are transmogged into it, in Throne of Thunder, you will get the buff Surrounded by Trolls. And essentially, so much as walking near the trolls will cause them to all run away in fear. The reason why is because Stromkar has a, it was like the bane of the Zandalari trolls or something. But a lot of people in Legion Remix actually abused this to kill the third boss in this raid on heroic difficulty very, very easily. Next up, we have the Dark Animus. Anyone who has done this fight on heroic when it was current, they had PTSD for this boss, because this boss was Siegecrafter Blackfuse be damned. This boss was the hardest boss in all of Pandaria, as this fight would basically end on heroic mode like 5 seconds max after it started if your group wasn't prepared. Especially on 25 heroic. This fight was an actual nightmare, and anyone who did it when it was current will vouch for me when I say this fight can go to hell. And Empresses are the only instance of female Mogu ever being recorded in World of Warcraft, making these two incredibly unique models. So if we ever were to get Mogu as a playable race, they would most certainly follow the model of these two if you desire to be a female. All right, and that is going to conclude part 2 of the random WoW raid facts that you may or may not have known about. I've seen a lot of positive feedback on part 1. I am glad you guys are enjoying this series that I am doing. And do not fret, part 3 is going to be here with some very good facts. I just wanted to save them to start off the next one big. So hope you guys enjoy this video. I will see you in the next one. Have a fantastic rest of your day.